There is no limitation to the number of dimensions that Minecraft can have in a technical sense. Mojang themselves even added billions of them as a joke in 2020, but yet despite that, we haven't seen a new dimension since 2011, and our last major update to it was in 2015. There's a fascinating design idea that is quite public that is limiting Minecraft, and today's story will cover the entire history, the potential way past it, and even into the fourth dimension, which has been missing for a while, as well as the red dragon, which is the weird diversion along the way. I hope you enjoy these deeper history videos. If you do, please do subscribe to the channel so you can see more stuff like this. But hello, I'm AbbyXToyCat, and I'm not going to bury the lead here. I'm going to tell you that I recently discovered one of the most early biomes in Minecraft was the Hell biome. Because in dev Minecraft, you would be able to customize your entire world, including the size, but also including the theme. Obviously, Hell is the most drastic of these themes. I mean, just look around this, but there is also this, and oh wow, that's Survival Island. Still popular world type even now, but there's also this. Wait a minute, is that the Aether chilling in 2009 Minecraft? It does look like it might be, but the actual story here is this biome later became the inspiration for the end in its early stages, and that early stage end, when it was much more functioned and modeled on heaven than whatever the end currently was, that is what later became the inspiration for the Aether mod, which later would become one of the most popular ideas for the fourth dimension. However, it's actually based on this third dimension, and honestly presents one of the big problems, but I think we need to take a few steps back to explain how the end went from this to this, and from this to this, and so let's do that right now. Did you know the Ender Dragon was actually one of the earliest features ever planned for Minecraft? You might recall how Notch spoke a lot in early TigSource forum posts about what he planned for with the game, but he also made this vision for survival on his own Tumblr, which is now deleted, but it's archived, and you can see what he planned for Minecraft in 2009 as early as the 14th of June. He says in here, when referring to the end game, that while it could be fun just to see how long you can survive in survival mode, I believe there is need for some kind of goal. Make the most money in a month, ? Kill a big evil mob in the shortest time? I don't know yet, and that is the earliest reference to a big mob boss being the end of the game. However, at the same time, although this could have been the plan he had all along, it is much more likely that lots of the things from this were scrapped and then later came back, because if you look through this grand plan, there are a few things which turned out to be accurate, such as at the bottom of the game screen having an inventory list and a health bar. Selecting things from the inventory list will work like it does now with the scroll wheel or buttons directly. He also references that the difficulty levels would range from challenging to impossible, since he wants the game to be difficult. He does say if it's not fun to always be challenged, he'll add easier difficulties, but we never did get anything from challenging to impossible, just a hard, a normal, and an easy, and then even a peaceful. So to take a small diversion and look through some more of these predictions, one of my favorite ones is the idea that there'll be hostile mobs roaming the map, goblins, trolls, wolves, whatever fits, they will be blocky, winking face. And then there's another reference to having 2 sets of tools as well as armor and helmets, and he says there'll be an iron as well as a steel, which you get by combining iron and coal. Obviously that one didn't pan out, but yeah, this was the very first reference to lots of things which would later become Minecraft features, lots of things which wouldn't, but most notably the end, some form of end boss there, which wasn't referenced again until 2011. Notch hinted at a third playable dimension in the middle of this year, and it was going to be called the Sky Dimension, directly contrasting the hellish Nether added the previous year with floating islands instead of cavey Netherrack. This year was incredibly busy for Minecraft as they geared up for a release though, and it wasn't really discussed until much later that year, and it wasn't how you'd expect at all. If you take this Notch tweet from 2011, he references how 4chan, the /v board, is petitioning him to change the name from Endermen to Farlanders. How about we just rename the Farlands to The End instead? This to me shows two things. One, that Notch is there reading criticism and thoughts about his game, even as they're in that huge crunch in the months before release, but it also tells us that The End was clearly a name they thought had been freed up that didn't exist anywhere else, because if they were considering renaming the Farlands as The End, they could have been considering this as the place where you find the Enderman, which would have been ridiculous, but I think if you look at the Farlands, it has just as much identity and feel as the Sky Dimension ever did, and so even when October rolls around and we get our first look at a new dragon, it isn't explicitly in something called The End. As you can see in this early screenshot, the dragon is a very, very early design model. still, it's much blockier than the finished release, but the end as a whole has mostly taken form here. In fact, here's something quite interesting. So Notch deleted most of his posts to do with Minecraft on his Tumblr and as well as his YouTube channel soon after he sold the game and was kind of done with it. However, he made a whole separate YouTube channel just to post these two videos, one of which is this weird dark footage of the end with no towers, and the second of which is entitled Why the Ender Dragon Won't Spawn in the Overworld. These two videos alone confirm that there was going to be a dragon, the Ender Dragon, as the end of the game, and that obviously there was going to be some other dragon for the overworld. About that though, this is the most famous unreleased Minecraft feature perhaps of all time. It has come up again and again in the community, and it was announced not long after the Ender Dragon was added, as best I can tell in this tweet from Notch of 2011, October the 12th, which is really not that long after the Ender Dragon was being added, because he says that after release, I will totally work on slightly less dangerous dragons that don't destroy terrain and can land and whatnot. They will be red. This is a red dragon, one that is going to be less dangerous to both you and presumably also the terrain, and this is a really good idea that people absolutely fell in love with. However, he said it'd be after release, and so it was something that was pushed into the future, and obviously it's easy to dismiss now because Notch doesn't work on the game. However, not long after this, Jeb did also confirm himself that he would add it to the game. Interestingly, in this exact same post, he thinks that adding fish mobs would be a bigger challenge because of how many mobs would be on screen at one time, but that did eventually release in 2019. Jeb isn't the only famous developer who's commented on this and mentioned that he could do it, but just hasn't gone around to it, because Dinnerbone also confirmed in this particular post not only that the red dragon would be coming, but also that he wants boobies. I mean, I think this is a fun reminder of how different the messaging was allowed to be 9 years ago in Minecraft. Imagine a Minecon Live now where Jeb talks about how much he's going to that night. I mean, I would watch that, but it would be a very different tone to what Minecraft goes for now. But yeah, it is a good point to say that Minecraft has said multiple times they are going to add the red dragon. So where is it? I don't notice any other dragons in the game. The simple answer I can come up with is that the dragon was a disastrous amount of work that just no one felt like replicating to make in the overworld, which would also then go against a lot of Minecraft rules about natural disasters and whatnot. Do you want to have a boss-style mob, or should it be something that's friendly that you come up after? I think something like a mountain update, like we recently had, would be a great opportunity because he could perch really high and that could be a challenge to going up there. However, it's something that Minecraft has basically said they'll get round to, but ultimately is a lot harder than it sounds like. But if I had to guess based on all the information we have available and the last reference to it being several years ago, every Minecraft developer who's been motivated to work on it has later gone, oh god, this is an amount of work that I am not comfortable with, and so that is seemingly where the red dragon is. It's on the big list of ideas that Mojang is totally going to add when they get the time for it, but as you know, if you've worked on a creative project, getting the time for something can be really hard. However, they did get the time to specifically release Minecraft. So November 2011 rolls around and the big launch party goes ahead. They add the third dimension into Minecraft alongside a whole host of other features and this poem. It was added by a man called Julian Gao, and 11 years later there's controversy about whether it's really owned by Minecraft, but for now let's just know that it was added because Notch wanted something that felt weird for Minecraft, and so 9 minutes of rambling about the universe is in fact deliberate and honestly beautiful. I think weird and maybe a bit beautiful is how you might define the entire end fight, because the way you get to this dimension is you find a stronghold, then you put offenders into the end portal, you go in, and wow, there's a dragon. It says boss health at the top, and you've got to kill this dragon by taking down her sources of health regeneration and then taking her down herself. Just like the poem says that everything you need is inside of you, they clearly believe that this dimension with just 3 main features was perfected. It's a place to duel the dragon, and no changes were made until they eventually decided this dimension needed some content years later. I'm just kidding, they did actually change the sky in 1.3, which does look a lot nicer, especially with night vision, but you realize very quickly that yeah, this was all for a very long time, and it makes you realize the end as a whole was just a single purpose dimension. It was a place to fight the dragon and not a lot more. Honestly though, this sky really is just about the only thing that makes the biome unique. The Nether has 3 core parts to its identity: the 8:1 scaling versus the overworld, the unique mobs and blocks, and the difference in physics. Water cannot exist outside of cauldrons, and lava flows much faster and farther. So when you compare these 3 things versus the end, you'll realize only the second one belongs to that, and even then, if you compare the list of blocks and mobs, this is a much weaker end than Nether. Even now, now after these updates. Here's a thought experiment for you to make you realize why identity is so important. Imagine an overworld with infinite different biomes. You can teleport between them every minute, but you won't know which part of the world the portal will take you to. Well, you've just created the 20W Infinite snapshot. To be fair, the thing that makes some of these dimensions different are the different conditions, whether that's overworld, caves, or sky, but you'll barely notice the difference between dimensions based on the Nether and the ones based on the End. There is very little that really differentiates the three major dimension types when you actually change the blocks and everything else about them, which is the biggest thing that should help you realize that these dimensions don't have enough identity in their own right. It should be really clear when you're in the End, not based on seeing all the end stone around, but based on how the dimension itself actually functions. Even the Nether is missing a little bit compared to what it could directly have, but the End is just absolutely missing, and so that's why they decided to make... We've been asking for this forever, but it actually already came and was the first update post Microsoft purchase. I mean, obviously it's a big update and it's very important, but it's overshadowed by other things in that update, let's say. And so this update is famous for adding other things, and then the End Islands, with their new structure and terrain and ability to teleport around the dimension. This update even added, as Tommaso put it, a feature which is a lot like Mario 64. This was the world's first ever announcement of the Elytra, by the way, an incredibly game-changing feature, but this End update wasn't just about adding the End Islands, as amazing as they were. It wasn't just about the chorus fruit and tipped arrows and all of the things in between. It was also where they substantially changed the Ender Dragon fight, at least for players not on the console edition. Here's another fun tangent where a dimension got a lot of its identity from 4J Studios because they drastically altered the End fight when they added it to consoles. The Xbox 360 at the time was capable of running the End, but they decided rather than porting it over directly, why not make a much friendlier fight so that players wouldn't be confused on these consoles. At first it seemed a bit weird to change the entire fight, but there are three major changes that they made when they introduced 1.0 to the consoles back in TU9, and the first one arguably made the End a little bit easier. It centered all of the obsidian pillars around the End portal. This is a much better way of doing things, you might argue, because now they'll be within some distance of each other and closer to where the dragon can actually defend them, so maybe not actually easier in any way. The second change they made was that two of the towers would always have these iron bar cages around them. This was a really seriously cool addition. And then the third change was that the dragon wouldn't just have physical attacks, she could also fire Dragon's Breath as well. So this Dragon's Breath was just an attack at the time. The acid attacks were huge and scary, and honestly, this was an example of Minecraft Console Edition not just taking the Java and porting it over, but actually making it actively better. They did make the games technically different for a while there, but the end result was that whenever a Minecraft developer from the Java edition played the console, they went, wow, yeah, this is cool, why don't we make this into our edition? Something they did in 1.9 in the End update, although it's got a different name that we won't be referring to right now. It's definitely 1.9 the End update, and that's when they finally took that from the console to the PC. There's a whole tangent here about how Minecraft Bedrock could massively learn from this. So many exclusive features started on Bedrock or Java and then later made their way to the other edition, and it feels like right now, if for some reason the Bedrock edition didn't have the End, they would just port the End exactly how it was from the Java edition, rather than saying, why don't we use this as an opportunity to make it better, like 4J Studios did back in the day. By the way, since this update not only took the console edition End fight, but also added those End Islands I mentioned earlier, when those same End Islands came to console, they actually did port them in my opinion, an inferior way. It was very strange because you could go through these End gateways, but it wouldn't take you to an entirely different part of the dimension with endless End Islands, because there was no infinite terrain in console. Instead, it would take you to these very small self-contained islands. There were 4 of those per console edition world, and it's one of those incredibly weird artifacts of the console edition, just having less space to play around with. And so that is something I need to mention because, yeah, of course, on Bedrock, you can not only have an infinite End Island, you can not only have the console edition End fight, but also, because render distances have gone up so much, if you play with above 60 chunks of render distance, you'll see that you can actually notice the End Islands all the way from the main land, something which was never intended even when this End update came out in 2015. Again, it was definitely called the End update, didn't have another another name. This was the last time they updated the end in any serious way. And so what has happened in the years since? I think an end update is so hard to define in terms of scope though. You could add more mobs and blocks, you could add more biomes, but I think the harder thing to do would be to give the dimension a point. Outside of good loot and elytras, why bother exploring the depths of this dimension? I really racked my brain on this for a really long time, and the best answer I can give is, I guess, to find more of these teleporting and gateway things. This is the only dimension you can hop across so quickly. The closest thing this place has to an identity that doesn't come from its blocks and its mobs is that you can go across the entire thing very quickly, but because unlike the Nether, it doesn't scale any amount the overworld, there's one way in and there's one way out, and they happen to be about 100 blocks apart. There's basically no reason to come out here for all of this teleporting. Maybe if there's something fun that happened here, maybe the difficulty scales as you get further and further away from the end island, or maybe the loot scales, or the challenge, the reward, whatever it is, the reason to be out there should be something which gets better and better the further out you go, because otherwise, why is it infinite? Once you find your first end city, you've basically finished this place, and so finding new biomes, if they were super, super rare, could be that identity, but I think there is a serious gap missing. And so that is what brings us into the fourth dimension. King B Dogs, who is the developer behind the Aether, specifically said the Aether would not be coming to Minecraft. He also specifically said that if there was going to be a new dimension, it's important for it to have its own identity, and so the reason we don't have a fourth dimension is because why do we even have a third? I have a giant tunnel and a village and pillage outpost in my end, but what is the point besides being deliberately weird? The best thing about this dimension is the fact that there is a nothingness void between the main island and the end, where you can build anything you want and there's no background to it whatsoever, but is that enough of a reason? Is my fun build where I covered an entire end island in sand interesting enough to you? Or is that just me being quirky? Maybe it can be both, thank you if so. But like, if you look at this, you realize that the only real difference here is that there is a lack of non-Enderman mobs, which is really fun if you aren't having all of your sand moved around by Enderman, but it is actually a interesting identity, you could argue. The lack of difficulty out here can make it the end game for building in Minecraft, but I think they need to lean into that and do a much better job at making players feel like that's the case before you can add a fourth dimension. Where would a fourth dimension go? What niche would it have? Everyone points to the ancient city portal, but until you can say what should be on the other side and why it should be there, I think the fourth dimension is a non-starter. I like that we have the early game lore to where that place might be, what it might do, but I think it's going to be a long, long time until we see the end updated, and before, as many developers, Jeb himself included, have said, until we have an end update, we cannot have a fourth dimension. Is that good thinking? Is the fourth dimension ever going to be necessary? Is a, perfect trifecta of hell, heaven, and then the regular overworld in between them, is that enough already? These are all questions that I'd like to actually hear your thoughts on, but for now, this has been the slightly secret history of the end. I hope you've enjoyed the journey that we took through the Red Dragon and the console edition, and let me know if you like these history off videos where I actually take the time to dive into each of the tangents that I know, usually I just say as an aside, like, there's the Red Dragon, but I think it's much more fun to dive into them. Let me know what you think, and maybe consider liking or subscribing if you really liked it. Thank you to Notelu for editing this together, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Goodbye.